I'm Alicia Tucker. I'm the Director of Education for the Society of the Cincinnati, and this is Dr. Saul Cornell. He's a professor of history at Fordham University and is one of the nation's leading scholars on American constitutional thought, especially the Second Amendment. He is formerly the director of the Ohio State University's Second Amendment Research Center at the John Glenn Institute and has been invited to speak at symposiums by both the Brady Center for the Prevention of Gun Violence and also the National Rifle Association. His work has been cited by the Supreme Court in cases related to the Second Amendment, and he's the author of a book on anti-federalism, and the basis of our discussion today will be a book called A Well Regulated Militia, The Founding Fathers and the Origins of Gun Control in America. This discussion will be available to anybody, but we are especially interested in helping teachers understand the history so that they can teach their students in their classrooms. And we will talk about the founding era understanding of the Second Amendment and how it's changed over time to today. So we're glad to have you.
Well, thank you very much.
To start off, you write in the preface that you stumbled upon the topic quite by accident. What happened?
Well, I actually started working on the Anti-Federalists, and I noticed that there was a lot of new scholarship on the Second Amendment, and they kept on talking about the Anti-Federalists. And the vision of anti-federalism that I found in all of this new scholarship, a lot of it done by gun rights activists, publishing in law reviews, didn't really ring true to me. It didn't sound like the Anti-Federalists I had just spent 10 years of my life working on, so I thought, this is interesting. I think I'm going to try and get to the bottom of this. So I started working on the topic, and interestingly enough, when you work on anti-federalism, you get invited to lots of academic conferences, but suddenly you show an interest in the Second Amendment, and the pages of the New York Times are open to you, and reporters are calling you. These days, you know, when I pick up the phone, it could be Al Jazeera, it could be the BBC. People are very interested in guns and guns in America. It's a very hot topic.
In the preface of your book, you write how you, for this book, used resources that previous scholars on the Second Amendment didn't use. So what were some of those resources?
Well, there were two things, really. Most of the discussions of the Second Amendment, and it's really quite remarkable because there's no other part of our constitutional history or law that is so obsessed with the founding moment. I think even among those people who consider themselves originalists, people who believe we should interpret the Constitution according to its original meaning or the original intent of those who wrote it, those are two slightly different forms of originalism that are prevalent today, would admit that there's a long history, and so while you might start with the founders, you would never freeze things at the founding moment. What's really interesting is you can't have a discussion about the Second Amendment without sort of getting trapped in the founding year. It's really hard to get out of the founding year. People always go back to the founding year. They always pull quotes out from the founding year. So that, I think, is somewhat unusual in our constitutional tradition.
You also wrote that you're often amazed if people often ask you if you're pro or anti-Second Amendment, and it's like somebody asking a First Amendment scholar if they're pro-First Amendment or anti-First Amendment. Would you help us understand where you're coming from in your view of gun policy in America, where it should be now?
Well, it's interesting. I had a student who came to my office the other day and said, I see that you're teaching a class on constitutional history in the fall. And I said, yeah, are you thinking of taking it? He said, yeah, I'm really interested in the Second Amendment. I understand that that's an area of your expertise. Are you for it or against it? And I looked at him quizzically and I said, you know, that's interesting. People ask me that all the time. If I told you that I thought that there was no right under the First Amendment to have child pornography, would that make me pro-First Amendment or anti-First Amendment? And he gave me that look that students sometimes get when you ask them a question like that, which is to say, smoke started coming out of his ears, and he had that very discombobulated look. And he said, I've never thought about it that way. I said, well, then maybe you should take my course.